Greetings, Perl citizens. It is I, your fearless leader, Will the Chill. Some of you may know me by my legal name, Will Braswell. Welcome to episode 16 of the exciting show by the Perl community for the Perl community known as the Perl Town Hall. Yes, we have another fascinating episode. We're going to do a Perl News Desk style episode with several news items, including some more hot news about Perl 7. And not just that, but also we'll be talking about RPerl 7 and lots of other stuff as well. So welcome to Moles Generoso, Jason Lewis, everyone who is joining us live and joining us after the broadcast. You can type your questions into the comment box below, and if you're here during the live session, we may actually be able to answer your questions as part of our show. And also, if you're coming after the show, then you can still type your questions, and we may be able to answer them in the comments after the fact. So welcome everyone again. This is the Perl Town Hall, and I am Will the Chill. So let's see, we have several news items we're going to go through today, and I'm actually going to probably just share my web browser so that we can go through a lot of these items, and hopefully this will work out correctly. So let's go ahead and give myself a web browser. Pow! That was cool. And okay, so here we're on our group actually right now, and thank you, Miss Benny, for giving our sound check. She's very loyal to give me the thumbs up on the sound check every time. And so yes, we're going to go through some of the hottest Perl news from this week. And of course, you can follow along at home by scrolling down through all of our cool and hilarious and very informative items here. And we're going to start right here with, boom, RPerl version 7.0. That's right, we're talking about the RPerl optimizing compiler. And in the past, we would have said the RPerl optimizing Perl 5 compiler. But now we don't have to say 5 anymore. We can just say the word Perl. And in fact, we are completely skipping over Perl version 6 and going to Perl version 7. And likewise, we are also skipping over RPerl version 6 and jumping straight to RPerl version 7. So this is, a sort of calculated motion or movement in the versioning number scheme. You can go watch the Perl conference talks by Sawyer X about why he chose to increase by 2 instead of skipping to some other numbers. But now we know the cat is out of the bag, and so we will use this as our opportunity, probably, sort of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to synchronize the versions of Perl and RPerl. So RPerl has been having one major version release every year for the past several years now, and now that we have a new major version of Perl coming out, we're able to finally match up the Perl version 7 and the RPerl version 7. So now these two match together, and we'll see how things go in the future. Oh wow, welcome to Matthew Cruz, welcome to my good friend Mr. Mokapati, and everyone else who's joining us on the live stream. Lots of people here. Give us your comments, say hello, and let us know what you're thinking. So yes, we have released RPerl version 7.0, and this is codename Nova. Wow, Nova. That's actually the fireworks Nova there, which is pretty cool. I think it's neat. I'm interested in space-related things, so that's one of the fun things that we get to do with RPerl is sort of cool code names and so forth. But anyway, this is a new major version of RPerl, and I was just going to touch on that for a moment. I know it's a relatively technical topic, but this is a technical TV show. It is, after all, the Perl Town Hall. So we'll talk for just a minute about Perl stuff and some technical things here. So here's an example with the RPerl compiler test suite. And you can see we're looking at test number 05, which is the part of the type system, the data type system, and we're testing arrays. So why are we going to be looking at array tests? Well, RPerl version 7.0 is part of a multi-phase approach to enabling array and hash by value. And I know this sounds like sort of day one computer science, because perhaps in a way it is, but implementing array and hash by value as part of a compiler is a challenging thing. And we have, of course, always had array and hash by reference, and that was sort of planned from the beginning. And we did give the dereferencing ability so that you can still use Perl operators that require calls by value, but that's only part of it, because there's sort of a bigger picture here that having arrays and hashes available for use both by value and by reference is something that will play perhaps a bigger part in the compiler in general. So let's just look for a minute and see what we're talking about. Here's the old tests, and you can see we're calling integer array ref. This may be hard to read. Let me see. Sorry, I'm going to have to zoom in here. Okay, hopefully that helps us here a bit. You can see we're calling this Perl subroutine called integer array ref to string format. You can ignore the format part because there's several of them. There's string expand, and there's string pretty, and there's just a regular one here. So just imagine we're talking about integer array ref to string. What we're seeing here is that you have to provide or sort of encode the data type, which in this case is integer, which is part of the data structure, integer array ref, and that's part of the actual subroutine name. And so this is an issue that is sort of limiting in the way that you can utilize even array by reference. And so as part of the ongoing multi-phase approach to upgrading the data structure subsystem of the RPerl optimizing compiler, we'll scroll down and we'll see that there is now here a new thing that it even conveniently tells us right here is dynamic dispatch. Okay, and you'll notice that the the name of the subroutine is now just array ref to string. It's not integer array ref to string, or number array ref to string, or string array ref to string. This is a stringification subroutine that it's like a pretty printing sort of thing, so you can see what your array reference looks like. But the point is not what it's doing here, the stringification. The point is that it's now enabling dynamic dispatch. I wonder, I can't remember, what does dynamic dispatch mean again? I'm glad you asked. Well, if you don't remember all of your data structures and algorithms and language theory and so forth from computer science class, then let's just review. Basically, whenever you call a subroutine, or a function in this case, and you pass an argument, which we have an array reference of numbers here, then the compiler or interpreter needs to know the data types of those arguments. Now, in a dynamic interpreted language, like normal Perl, the data structures are actually compound data structures, and they have array and string and floating point number or integer, string, and floating point number values, all sort of mashed together. And that is not the same for compiled languages. Compiled languages tend to have strongly typed systems where each data, each variable or piece of data is only essentially containing a single data type. Now you can create structs and so forth, and in fact that's pretty much what Perl does, because Perl is written in C. But what we're talking about here are normal data types and data structures. So when you call a function or subroutine, if you have single dispatch, then that means there's only one way to call that function or subroutine, and it has to have the correct data type here in the arguments. If you have what's called multiple dispatch, then you could have two different versions of this subroutine, which are defined as accepting different input data types. And that's what we call multiple dispatch. And then finally, last of all, you have dynamic dispatch, and that's when you have a sort of smart subroutine that knows how to detect and react to its input data type. And that's part of our ultimate challenge, is to enable dynamic dispatch, because that's one of the ways that interpreted languages work. And we're trying to compile an interpreted language, which is a very tricky thing. So this does now work in RPerl, I am very proud to say, and it works not only in sort of normal Perl, which is interpreted and is comprised of Perl operations and Perl data types. So we call it Perl ops, Perl types. Not only does dynamic dispatch work in Perl ops, Perl types, which is not terribly difficult, but it also works in the two compiled modes, which is CPP operations on Perl types and CPP operations on CPP types. And this is what we kind of call medium speed and high speed mode. And it works in all three modes now. So this is one test that calls this exactly named subroutine, and in fact these tests are repeated 3 times. If you go all the way up to the top, you'll see that it has the main run loop, and it even says Perl ops, Perl types, Perl ops, CPP types, CPP ops, CPP types. If I said any of that backwards, forgive me, just refer to the documentation. It's kind of a tongue twister when you say it all real fast. But the point is, we're calling all of this code in here, all of the tests, including the test we just looked at, 3 times for 3 different modes, and it has to compile each time. And I won't go too deep into the output of this, but if you want, you can go on the Travis continuous integration and look and see the output. It's a lot, because I have debugging messages turned on right now. But if you want to see sort of how does dynamic dispatch work in normal Perl, well, we're essentially creating a lookup table with function references that are indexed by a data type. And that's actually the sort of the standard programming procedure for creating dynamic data types, which for creating dynamic dispatch, which also works in C++. And we're just going to briefly look here. This is the TPP file. That's right. We have finally reached the point of maturity for RPerl that we are using C++ template system. And that's pretty exciting. And so you can see that there's a lot of dynamic dispatch stuff here. We use X macros. We have a list of the scalar types, a list of the array reference types. Hello, Mohammed. Good to see you, my friend, and everyone joining. Matthew Cruz, we'll get to your question in a minute. Chris Ford and everyone else. This is the C++ template code that creates all of the types in RPerl and allows you to convert between them and know what they are and so forth. And so, yeah, this is, I'll scroll down here real fast. This is the, well, I should mention this code, type fast, determines what data type you're using. And here you can see we're actually calling these SVNOK, SVIOK, SVPOK, and also number array ref check, integer array of check, and the SVAROK. I created several of these Perl internals type functions so that Perl can test its own data types at runtime, even when compiled. That's pretty awesome. And so you can see the same thing here, but we're returning type defs, C++ type defs. And then we get into the actual, this is dynamic dispatch code. This is a C++ function reference dispatch table that has function references in it. These are C++ function references, and they are dynamically dispatched here by having the same thing. This line of C++, there's a dereference to the function reference. There's the function reference dispatch table. There's the indexing based on a data type, and there's the passing of the argument. And this line is functionally equivalent to this line right here. Isn't that awesome? We can see how the compiled code and the interpreted code works by comparing them, and we can call them both from the same one call that does dynamic dispatch across all 3 compilation modes. And so last but not least, I'll just scroll down here to a bit, see the dynamic dispatch code itself. This is a bunch of shimming and wrapping of the old code, so you can still call it with the embedded type names if you really want to be explicit about it. But those are all just wrappers now. And here is the CPP ops CPP types. We actually have to do a super awesome cool dynamic dispatch trick here using the ellipses, which bypasses the excess pack and unpack wrappers of inline CPP and allows us to create our own dynamic dispatching, which is done here using a switch statement and explicitly calling the correct excess unpack. For those of you that are really deep into excess type sort of stuff. And then here we can see the actual dynamic dispatch function itself. That's called arrayref to string. This one, these are all the same with the switch lookup table. And if I get further down here, is there anything else that we need to look at in here? There might be one more. Nope, that's it for now. So that's at least the main overview of how you can compare the C++ code to the Perl code and call them all with the same single call, and it does actually give you functioning dynamic dispatch. I know that was a lot of technical talking there. I apologize, but hey, this is your compiler theory update class here with Will the Chill. So before we move on to our next news items, which we'll go through a bit more quickly, Matthew John Sino Cruz, welcome, with the Harry Potter logo there. He says, I have an existing Perl IDE I used to web scrape in the past. Do I just need to upgrade my IDE to recognize the new version of Perl, or is there another IDE that contains the newer version of Perl? Wow. That does not appear to be related to anything we're talking about here, and without knowing what IDE you're using, it's pretty much impossible for me to answer that question. Also, I'm not sure what an IDE has to do with web scraping. An IDE is an integrated development environment. This is like essentially a tool that you use to write code, and it helps you debug your code and so forth. Web scraping is like an application that you're writing that copies HTML or other data off of a web page and uses it for some purposes. I don't think those two things are related, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's an IDE that does web scraping for some reason. Also, the IDEs being linked to a specific version of Perl, that should also, those two things are not really connected together. I do have an IDE that I use for Perl when I'm writing complicated code, like for the compiler. I use Epic, which is actually written in Java, I'm sad to say, but it does, it's the Eclipse, which is written in Java. That's the IDE, and Epic is the Eclipse Perl plugin. And I also use the VI plugin on top of that. So that's my IDE. I'm also working on building a new Perl IDE in the cloudforfree.org platform. And I know that there was like an old Perl IDE called Padre, and I think that Active Perl may have an IDE for Windows people. I wouldn't really know much about that. But yeah, whatever IDE you're using, it should not be like somehow tied to the version of Perl you have, unless it's something like you're using Windows and you're getting it all sort of bundled together, and then you're just, I mean, you're using a sort of crippled or disabled operating system that, and you have to combine Perl with the IDE just to make it work. And if that's the case, I would recommend upgrading to a real operating system like Xubuntu, for example, just any Linux or anything that can run a full version of Perl. But I could be off base. I don't really know what the question is, so I would need more information to give you a better answer. Sorry, that's the best I could do just off the top of my head with the information provided. Okay, moving on to our next Perl news item, kablamo! This one is interesting. There's a new post by Zarul Zakuan. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. Good buddy of mine. And this was actually an article from Tech Republic that says Perl has gone up 5 positions in the TIOBE index, if I remember correctly, and we were at number 19, so we were just about to drop out of the top 20. Woo! That was close. I mean, I don't need to tell everyone how bad it's been for Perl lately. And so just based solely on the marketing-oriented announcement of Perl version 7 coming out here in the next few months, we have just popped right up 5 positions from number 19 to number 14. So, wow, that's awesome. This is, I am so hopeful that this is truly the curve coming back up again. And there's a lot of exciting reasons to be excited and a lot of exciting things going on. I mean, I just had a phone call today with one of the very well-known and respected members of the Perl community, and he told me about a really awesome new idea he has, and it's going to really help the Perl community. It's a big deal, and I'm so excited to be involved with that. So there's just like new things happening now with Perl. Now that we can move forward with a new version number, now that we have, momentum, we have the Perl community roadmap, we have the compiler, we have new projects being started. I mean, this is exciting, very exciting times for Perl. Okay, so you guys can look into that a little bit more if you want to click on that link there. Hello, William Taylor and Kurt Steinmetz. Thank you all for joining us today. Give us your comments and questions. Type them in below. Let us know what you think. And let us know what your thoughts are about Perl version 7. Or even the RPerl Optimizing Compiler, also version 7. Okay, moving on to our next topic here. This was more about Perl 7. So there was the ongoing discussions and debates in the P5P group about Perl 7. And it washes over into Perl Monks and into our Facebook group and everything else. So for those of you who are not aware, P5P is the Perl 5 Porters group, and I guess at some point that name is going to have to be upgraded. But this is the group that is essentially in charge of the Perl interpreter and has control over the Perl 5 interpreter source code and deciding things like version numbers and what goes into Perl core and what's a bug and what's a feature. Essentially, all of the most important technical aspects of the Perl language. And we all have to follow along with what P5P wants us to do. And they do have their own sort of, secret decision-making process, like behind closed doors. And we don't, know exactly what they're up to, but they do have their mailing list that a lot of stuff is posted on. There's been a lot of arguing. And the main argument, which is a valid point to discuss, at the very least, is breaking backwards compatibility. That's me breaking things, breaking backwards compatibility. Wow. Oh my gosh, I thought we just got rid of that headache with, Raku becoming its own thing. Well, I guess not, but the issue with Raku was that it was a wholesale breaking of compatibility, and you just have to upgrade to completely new code. That's not good, and that gets you, removed from the Perl namespace, so to speak. But But if we do small, careful, incremental, and important and significant and progressive changes that break some, again, small amount of backward compatibility, with a way to stop that breakage very easily by doing like, use version 5 or something, then this finally gives us some way to move our language forward, which, we have been stuck in the shadow of Raku for many, many years. I would say about 18 years for that issue. And for 26 years, we've been stuck with the major version of Perl 5. And so now that we're going to Perl 7, we really can finally start upgrading our language. And I'm going to, try my best to help with that. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge, say no more. But everybody wants to have their opinion heard, and everybody wants to argue about this on P5P and Perl Monks and online and everywhere else. And there's a lot of debate. Most of the debate, that sort of constructive debate, has to do with how to handle the potential breakage. Some people just want to say, I don't want Perl 7 at all, or this sort of stuff, and you can't fight the tide, but what you can do is, deal with the tide and float on the tide and try and make the rising tide lift all of the boats together. And so we will have some code that breaks on CPAN, and my own comment on this was that I hope I hope that for whatever sort of, if you'll excuse the term, crappy old code is broken, then it will be replaced with an equivalent or greater amount of shiny new code on CPAN. And that even maybe someday we can, have an archive mode where that crappy old broken code gets marked as archival and does not get automatically installed. And we can sort of upgrade CPAN at some point. Wow, we're really starting to be like a modern language a little bit here. And so anyway, I guess most of these discussions just boil down to whatever semantic differences are going to be in the use Perl version 7 or use Perl version 5 or whatever sort of version guards or feature guards, whatever terminology you want to use. These are sort of like pragma operations that control the way that Perl itself behaves. And I'm very gung-ho about moving forward with the language because we have been stuck for so long that we're playing catch-up here. I mean, just to be truthful, we didn't have a roadmap till I wrote it. We didn't have a compiler till I wrote it. We were stuck with the same version number until last weekend. And that hasn't even been officially released yet. It's just announcement. So there's been a lot of limitations in our community, in our language. But boy, I'm so excited. I mean, I'm so hopeful. I'm even just today, my hopes have redoubled that the future of Perl is in fact quite bright, and that there's going to be perhaps some small amicable divorce, which I would in fact hope could be more along the lines of, Raku getting its own foundation so we can have our own money and move forward with our own grant processes and our own professional, projects. But there will have to be some break. Somebody's going to break up with somebody else. And it's going to be us breaking up with the crappy old broken code, and it's going to be us breaking up with the crappy old community and ways of doing things, and it's going to be us as the new Perl community breaking up with the older version of our own selves. Look in the mirror. Do you like what you see? Well, if you don't, then guess whose fault it is? The finger's pointing right back at your own self. And so we have to be the change we want to see in the world, to borrow the old proverb. So this is something where we're all going to have to do something. It's not enough for me to make TV shows about things. It's not enough for y'all to watch TV shows about Perl things. We're going to have to write new code. We're going to have new projects. We're going to have to do new marketing efforts. And we're going to have a new mindset about things. We're going to have to stop with the political agendas. And we're going to have to heal our own community and move forward. And there's going to be shifts in power, and there's going to have to be shifts in the way things are done. We can't keep having decisions being made behind closed doors by the TPF board of directors and by P5P. We need to have democracy somehow. We need to have the community involved in having a voice in its own fate and future somehow. And we need to upgrade our entire Perl way of life. Our hearts, our minds, our spirits, our fingers typing code here with our earthly bodies, everything's going to have to change. And it will, believe me. There are those of us pushing for this to happen, that it's going to happen one way or the other, and we all want to go together. We all want to be on the winning team, Team Perl. So let's do it. Let's break the code that has to be broken, fix it again, and make it even better, and move forward with Perl. Next news item. Oh, Dean the machine from down under. Also now down on the left coast there, but Dean wrote an interesting blog post, another thing about Perl 7 having to do with the object-oriented system that's being created by Curtis Ovid Poe. That's called Corinna, or Core, C-O-R for short, confusingly named, not to be confused with the Perl Core distribution, C-O-R-E, which are all of the modules and files that are shipped along with Perl when you get it and install it. So the OO issue, this is something Dean thinks we should have frameworks but not have a built-in object-oriented system for Perl. I disagree. A lot of people disagree. A lot of people agree with him. But it seems like, again, disagreeing about this may or may not actually have any effect, because I think it's already like a done deal, okay? And this is already a decision that, again, for better or worse, appears to have been made sort of behind closed doors, that Sawyer and Ovid have decided between the two of them to do this. And you know what? I'm fine. I am supporting Curtis Ovid Poe in his efforts to have a built-in object-oriented system for Perl, because we need it, and it makes us look like we're behind the times by not having it. And you can still use Moose or Moo or Mouse or whatever if you want, but I am going to completely upgrade the RPerl optimizing compiler to use the syntax as best as I can that Curtis is coming up with. Now, I do have, some issues we have to work out about how data types are handled. And you can see that I am pretty deep into Perl data types, maybe deeper than most anyone else. So I'm going to have to work with Curtis on that. Hopefully he'll come on our show at some point and talk to us about his opinions on these things. And we can learn more about his ideas about data types and object-oriented programming and all that. But we will have a new object-oriented system, probably for Perl 7 or shortly thereafter. And, you know, you can just build more frameworks on top of that, I guess. I mean, we've got Catalyst, we've got Modulicious, we've got Dancer. Those are 3 really good frameworks. I built the Cloud for Free system using Catalyst. I build some new apps using Mojo. It's up to your needs. They're different sort of frameworks, so use them for different things. But you can go a deeper dive into this object-oriented framework argument if you want. There's a lot of comments here about that. One thing I was going to point out that Dean has a good point about is that C is almost 50 years old and it's still number 1. Wow. Still number 1. That's pretty amazing. So Perl is what, 32 years old, I guess? So, hey, I mean, we just moved up 5 spots. Huh? Not bad. If we can have a sort of coming together of the community and you know, making things work the right way, we could get back up into the top 10 and dare I say back in the top 5, and dare I say put Perl back on top, make Perl number 1, heck, make Perl great again. Why not? Just go on and say it. Make Perl great again. So we could be number 1. We could be. And no political agenda here. It's just tongue in cheek. But I am serious. I want Perl to be number 1. So yeah, there's a lot about frameworks here and people giving feedbacks. And Dean has a list of things he thinks should be put into the Perl core. Blah, 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 blah. And he made a special point also about this asynchronous programming that he wants to be in the Perl core as well. I'm not against any of that. I mean, if it works correctly and it deserves to be there, sure, great. There's other stuff that, you know, should be in the Perl core as well. But we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with these issues of governance. So yeah, okay, moving on with our last few items. There was a series of articles, 2 out of 3 released so far, by Mark Keating here. Some pretty cool and or frightening pictures of him up top there. But he is giving his overview of the marketing segments that were run during the Perl conference just recently. So, so that's pretty neat. There was a session about the direction of Perl that was called Improving the Perception of Perl. And I was there for all of these sessions, and he goes on to talk about the marketing team and what they're going to do in relation to this. So there was essentially this was a time to sort of give feedback to them, and it was they were giving their ideas of where they want the marketing team to go. In the past, the marketing team has been, this is the Perl Foundation's marketing team, to be clear. The Perl Foundation's marketing team has been somewhat without a direction. It suffered from lack of direction, okay, as it says here. The new direction is to have a centralized team. Mark is the chairman of that marketing team, which is good because he is Mark Keating for Mark Keating, and Mark is awesome. I mean, everything he does is just spot on, mate. And yeah, so we're going to work on more things such as branding and so forth, and it sort of carries over into the second article here, where we talk more about another session that was Also related to the Perl Foundation and marketing, and he has a joke here from XKCD, where you see all of these branding, complicated branding, but then the really simple, straightforward one that just says the name of the product: peanuts, tissues, potato chips, bread, and so forth. There is actually a brand called the No Frills brand that already does that. And yes, it is cheaper, lower quality, but hey, if you're on a budget, you can get that. So this was an interesting one where Stuart McIntosh, the president of the Perl Foundation, gave a report where they had hired a sort of marketing consultation agency of some kind to check out and assess Perl, as if they were like, you know, a new programmer or just a middle manager or somebody trying to learn about Perl, a new Perl person. And they found a lot of things that we all kind of already knew, like the Perl websites are all different, they don't link to each other very well, they don't look the same, they don't contain updated information, and there's not a sort of centralized repository for everything and so forth. So it would be good if we could have a uniform look and feel, which would be like a style, as we call it, with cascading style sheets in web development, and that could be used across all of the Perl websites. Great. I'll update my websites to comply. In fact, I've already kind of got my own, you know, bit of a style sheet with the sort of the certain shades of blue and so forth. But hey, I mean, we want Perl to be a unified community, so let's have unified web resources. So that's a good idea. We need more search engine optimization and so forth. There was discussion about the style guide, if it can become official, if we can enforce it on all of the websites that are run by the Perl Foundation, if the Perl Foundation can take ownership of websites that it needs to control and so forth. Also, a major issue was the logo. So there's the camel logo that is, you know, encumbered by copyright. I would love to have O'Reilly and Associates freely give that copyright to the Perl Foundation so that we can use it as our official copyright and have the camel represent Perl. But meanwhile, we can't. So people came up with this onion logo, and the onion really just is confusing with Tor, the onion router that's used for like illegal things or something. I've never used it. I wouldn't know. But then there's the Raptor logo that I guess MST came up with that. And it's cool, but it's kind of like frightening looking. I'm not against Raptors, but it needs to perhaps be a little more neutral or, you know, friendly perhaps. So we need something done about the Perl logo, and who knows what it's going to be. I don't know. There was other discussions and things. One of the fallouts afterwards was that we need more curated Perl content, not only a list of websites and resources, but actual like Perl news items and so forth. And so yeah, there needs to be like an actual marketing strategy, and hopefully next week we may know what that is, because Mark Keating says that he's going to discuss the first steps of the strategy for the Perl Foundation's marketing committee. So that should be pretty neat. In fact, I would hope to be able to get him on our show here with the Perl Town Hall at some point in the future to discuss these things and get feedback and so forth. So, moving on, do we have any other interesting news items? Ah, yes. Wow. Vlado, he released an amazing piece of academic work. But before I finish up with that, we do have a question. Mr. Mokapati says, is the core object system available now? If not, any schedule? I am not aware of it being available now. I've only been able to read about it. You may be able to find a pre-beta version on GitLab or GitHub, but I have not seen a link to that. So I'm guessing that it's either not been released yet or not been even implemented yet, and it's still just in the contemplative phase, as we say. But I don't know. I assume the answer is it's not available yet because I haven't seen it in use yet, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the answer would be negative on that. So hopefully we will have news about that as it becomes available. So moving on, our final very interesting issue. Oh, do you know of anyone? Okay, sorry. Another question here before we get to Vlado. William Taylor says, Will, do you know if anyone reached out to O'Reilly and asked about the logo? Do not reach out to O'Reilly. This is an issue that the Perl Foundation will have to deal with. Specifically, we're going to have to let Mark Keating's team deal with that because none of us can legally represent the Perl trademark except for, in this case, Mark and his team in relation to marketing. So I am assuming that either they have already done so or that it is on their list of possible options. And I'm hopeful that when we get the part 3 of Mark's blog posts, perhaps again in the next few days, this will say something that lets us know what they might want to do about the logo. I would be fine if we got rid of the onion because it is confusing. Here's my picture of the onion. There's the onion. Woo! I don't know if you can actually see that logo there. Let me see. Yes, the onion logo. So I would be fine if we got rid of the onion. And here's one of my buttons with the raptor on him there. Yes, there you go. The raptor. We can get rid of both of those if we can have something cool like the camel or something even better. Wondering if the TPF has tried and they said no. We have been told by O'Reilly's lawyers that you're only allowed to use the camel in relation to the Perlmongers in a limited fashion. So right now, that's still limited. As far as if anybody has said anything directly to the TPF or between TPF and O'Reilly, again, not a transparent organization. I'm just going to leave it at that. So, last but not least, Vlado. Wow, Vlado really did a cool thing here. Vlado's been working on this project called Starfish. And while I myself may not have any need for it right now, some of us may find it useful. And Vlado has published an academic article through the Computer Science Archive that's curated by Cornell University. And you can see this entire article here online for free. Starfish, a prototype for universal pre-processing and text-embedded programming. And Starfish is an open source system implementing this, again, universal pre-processing and text-embedded programming. And of course, Starfish is written in Perl. Awesome, Vlado, that is so cool. And if you read through his paper, you'll see that there are explanations of PTEP, what that means, pre-processing text-embedded programming. There's mentions of things in here like Mason and LaTeX and other stuff like that, make files. And there's some examples that he gives. There's PHP stuff here. And there's also actual code examples that he gives here, some HTML code examples. And then some Perl-based embedded programming. So here's some Perl code right here. Pretty cool. And then he goes on to a case study with Java. He's creating a Java preprocessor. So this is his Java example code using Starfish, which is written in Perl. So here he sort of is parsing and breaking apart the Java code, and he gets deeper and deeper until he finally gets to this cool graphic where everything's all split apart and labeled according to the preprocessor parsing and grammar, or however it works. I've not read the source code to Starfish myself, but he goes on here into the conclusion that is worth reviewing. So I'm just going to read through it here real quick. In this paper, we present a proposal for the PTEP in different contexts. There's a background and review of related work that shows PTEP is widely used in different contexts. The use is fragmented. The implementations use different context-specific syntax in most cases. This means if we want to apply PTEP to a new context, we would always need to implement a preprocessor from scratch, which is not good, obviously. So, Vlado's proposal is a universal approach to PTEP with a number of novel features and an open source implementation in Perl, again called Starfish. Excuse me. So he goes on to talk about the Java example there, and finishes here. In the grand view of things, universal PTEP is a step towards finding commonality in some universal preprocessing and text embedding tasks, defining them in a unified way in different contexts of textual computer instruction, such as computer programming, typesetting, configuration, and others. So that is pretty cool. Good job, Vlado. That's really neat. That is our academic highlight for this week's episode of the Perl Town Hall. So that brings us to the end. I just want to remind everyone to check out the RPerl Optimizing Compiler. We just have released the brand new version 7 codename Nova. Mind equals blown, with the really cool features of dynamic dispatch. And if you feel particularly inclined to do so, then I would welcome you to check out our patreon.com/RPerl. And you too can join Team RPerl in supporting the Perl Optimizing Compiler. So with that, I would like to thank everyone who's come online, quite a few people joining us, William Taylor and others who gave us some cool comments and feedback, and everyone watching from home, both during our live broadcast and after the fact. So I would invite you all to join me next week when we have another exciting live broadcast episode of the Perl Town Hall. Until then, this is your fearless leader, Will the Chill, coming to you live from the Perl capital of the world, Austin, Texas, saying stay safe, stay alert, and stay Perling. Thank you, and good night. And cut.